Welcome to It Comes In Pints, a Seattle Study Club podcast where we will explore a myriad of topics: clinical, health and well-being, psychological, education, business, and much more. I'm your host, Greg Tice.
So I'm John Sileo. I am a cybersecurity author, expert, and keynote speaker, particularly on the human elements of cybersecurity.
All right, so let's get started. So I want to welcome all of our listeners to another episode of It Comes In Pints with Greg Tice. This week we have John Sileo, a cybersecurity expert, joining us. Very excited for this. John, as you know, as we've talked about, the idea behind this podcast is sitting back and having a drink in a pub and a conversation. So we're drinking today. It's early for you. It's early for me. What are you drinking today?
Yep. Today I am having a cappuccino, and maybe I'll put a little scotch or something in it just to keep it interesting.
Well, you go ahead and do that scotch. It's too early for scotch for me, but I'm going coffee as well. So cheers to you, my friend. All right. So you and I go back quite a ways. I was trying to look it up right before we jumped on your first symposium, but I want to say were you with us in Cancun in 2005, or were we in 2006 the following year, I think?
I think 2006. It was, if I recall, it was in Florida.
Naples, Florida, yes. So you were my biggest event production lesson ever. If you'll remember, we had you on main stage, and immediately after your session, we had a short break, and then we went to breakout rooms, and we had about 10 breakout rooms going, designed for maybe 50, 60 people in a breakout room. And all of a sudden, there was a flood of people. It was standing room only in your room after the keynote. And we actually got in trouble with the fire marshal.
I remember them coming in and having to clear people out from the standing room only. And what a testament to the job you all did getting people in the room.
I think it was more a testament to people freaking out after they heard your program. So.
Just a little bit.
Just a little. So let's start there. I mean, you built your career really around protecting others from identity theft, from, with cybersecurity in general. Give me the story of how you got into this. What drew you? Give our listeners, I know the story, but give our listeners the story. What drew you to this in the first place?
Yeah, well, it wasn't the normal passion route of most speakers. It was pure fear, really. So I had two really bad cases of cybercrime. First one was a personal case where a woman stole my social security number out of some unshredded trash I'd thrown out, which was, it was years ago. We weren't all thinking about these things. And she used it to buy a home in Florida. She drained our life savings. She declared bankruptcy in my name and committed crimes, actually, as John Sileo.
Oh, jeez.
So that was a kind of a garden variety dumpster diver. You might know it from the movie Identity Thief, which was based on our experience with Jason Bateman and Melissa McCarthy. So it takes place in Denver, and it's a woman stealing a man's identity. All very much our story.
I can see the similarity between you and Jason Bateman.
Oh,
I totally
I wish. That is one handsome guy. So while I was busy dealing with that court case, I had started a new business with my best friend and rock climbing partner, Doug, a internet software company early in kind of the cloud game. And unfortunately, he utilized my identity to embezzle from all of our clients. And I faced a 2-year criminal trial. We lost the business, the software company, the family business that it was all a part of. And I spent 2 years just defending myself to stay out of jail. So it was a massive case of cybercrime, of insider theft, which, as you know, happens in the dental and orthodontist communities constantly, that inside aspect. And that was at that first Seattle Study Club that I did, and at many after, that was a lot of what we talked about in the breakout rooms, because it was the owners or the partners of the firm, the docs, who wanted to know, how do we think about inside theft?
Yeah, absolutely. So did both of those come to a positive conclusion, or are you still paying for those? What does that look like?
Well, yeah, $1 million later, paying back for what Doug had stolen from the clients. And we, as a business, it's like a marriage, really, a partnership. You don't get out of it. It's you're part of it no matter what. So we had to figure out how to pay it all back. That's when I wrote my first book, Stolen Lives. It did relatively well, and I went on this book tour that was, well, not a whole lot of fun.
No.
But the book tour led to the speaking tours, and that's what I've been doing now for a long time, is just going around the world speaking mostly on cybersecurity for businesses, small businesses. But of course, it touches on us as individuals. I mean, the way that we protect our smartphone, the way we protect our online accounts, our Alexa, our Facebook, our social media. That's where all of this starts anyway. So it lends itself well to building a culture, an organizational culture of security.
Yeah. So let's talk about your street cred a little bit. So you've got personal experience with this. You've been hit twice, at least, that we know of.
Yeah.
Are you self-taught beyond that? Where do you learn, right? So you obviously learn from personal experience, but now where are you getting your information from? And how long has this been? You've been teaching this for a long time. I mean, you and I go back to 2006. So
yeah. That's a good question. So I get to leverage my story to connect with audiences, right? So that's not really the content heavy portion of how do you protect yourself.
Right.
That's, listen, here's what happened to me. So I still utilize that as a connection with the audience, or with my readers. The actual how do you protect yourself varies so much by individual, small business, large, medium, large business, and enterprise. So it's very different. And where I've gained that knowledge is by working with virtually every sized business on what is going wrong. I've worked with the Pentagon and with Amazon and with Visa, and then with a bunch of smaller businesses, and with associations like the Seattle Study Club. So it's just getting to peer inside of the train wreck and understand what they didn't do beforehand and what they could have done to stop it, and what they have to do to recover from it, and how much more expensive recovery is than prevention.
Oh my God, yes.
That's really where I've gained the knowledge.
Okay, so let's run on the train wreck theme. What's the most creative scam or social engineering attack? What's the most creative thing you've seen in the last 4 or 5 years?
I'd say it's gotten considerably more creative in the last 18 months. And that's because artificial intelligence, which allows all of us to be more creative, to scale our work better, has really allowed the criminals to do that. So a great example is there's a decent-sized financial company that here's what the cyber criminals did. They created a deepfake video of the CEO. So actually the CEO talking, they phished his email account. So they actually took over control of his email account. They set up an entire call with the financial team, including the CFO. And on a Zoom call, they had the CEO asking the CFO to wire transfer $25 million. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't have a boss. I am my boss. But if I were, seeing my boss on video saying we need this done right away, we didn't pay the vendor, or whatever, excuse it is, people are really responding to those, and they've gotten so good because deep fakes, disinformation, and AI have really changed cyber.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I've been hit with those via email, right? It's
Yeah.
your CEO, so it's an email from Gary. We want you to wire 25,000. It's not 25 million on our front. And
Right.
because of you, I can see those things coming. But that's scary on a Zoom call.
On a Zoom call, yeah. So just imagine, the dentist, the doctor, the orthodontist being there on video saying, "Okay, Greg, we're in some serious trouble. I need you to do this right away." And he's talking back and forth and answering in general the questions that you're going to ask. And they're hitting stop and go on a pretty rudimentary piece of video to convince you to do this. It's really hard for a subordinate to say, no, I'm going to verify in some other way. I'm going to call the CEO. I'm going to email something other than the form of communication that you're on.
Yeah. Oh, frightening. Okay. So I want to build to that, to the AI component and what's happening now, but let's start really at the baseline level. And I've heard you present to clubs, at symposium, a number of places. But what are the basics that a practice or an individual should be thinking about just as a baseline to protect themselves from this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so in my keynotes, I use a framework, a blockbuster framework. I actually use blockbuster movies to think through the different areas because people tend to get overly focused just on the technology, that it's all about the technology. But I got to tell you, almost every attack that we see that is successful starts with a human being and with a human decision to give away information. Like, when I do my live iPhone hack in the audience for you all, I'm getting in there not on a technological flaw, I'm getting in there on a human decision to give me information. And that's how so many of the attacks start. So the answer there is you have got to update and consistently train your people on social engineering, the art of human manipulation, how I get you to do what I want you to do to give me the answers to get into the system. And that human training is by far the most missing aspect particularly among small dental doctor ortho offices is how do we detect what's real and what's not? Just like you said, you now get it. But so many organizations, from the doctors on down to the cleaners in the office, they need to know how this stuff is happening. So that's one of the first major things.
Social engineering. So what are some things to look for? What are some tips and tricks that I can use? I mean, it's moved. The stuff I have personally seen has been mostly email, but I am getting all sorts of crap over text now. And so what should we be doing to manage that from a social engineering standpoint?
One of the things that has changed radically in my presentations and in my writings is how much phishing has changed. So, it used to be kind, gentle sir, we appeal to your better nurture, this flowery language that you just could detect right away. It was sent from an address that when you dropped down, you could tell it was not who should be sending it. And when you hovered over the link, it was not taking you to where you thought you were going. And it was signed by, the prince, or it was pretty clearly a Nigerian scam.
But let's pause there for just a second. So those are two things right off the bat that we should be doing electronically is looking at the email address, the actual email address, and which is just expanding that window in the email.
Yep.
The other is if there's a link in the email, you hover over it. And
so you hover over and see, it says that you're going to Chase Bank, and when you hover over it, it's going to something.ru.russia. Some, it may have the word Chase Bank in it, but it's not next to the .com.
Yep.
It's further to the left. And, that along with scare tactics, if you don't do this, something will happen to you. If you don't pay your undue taxes, something will happen to you.
it's tolls now. That's a big one.
Tolls. Oh my God, the toll road stuff is unbelievable. um, they try and engage you in terms of helping. You know, we're good humans. I need help. If you'll help us with this situation. But I gotta say, before we think too much about that, that's one thing, and we're jumping back to AI because it has infiltrated everything we do in cyber. It's changed all of that. Now it comes from an email address that is your IT provider. It's scraped data from your social media site, so it knows where you were vacationing this last week, so it can send a picture from your Facebook, your Instagram that you put up. It's engendering trust. It doesn't scare you anymore. It's asking, hey, listen, we did an update on our computers and your computer is not up to date and you're going to be a security risk, so we need your help. They're asking, they're making you feel useful and responsible. And it's signed by an actual IT person with an actual phone number because nobody ever calls it to verify. So those old red flags of hovering and doing the drop down on the email, and is it a scare tactic, and are they offering me money, and are they requesting information? That has all changed, and the training is almost totally different at this point for what a phishing email looks like.
Oh boy. So what should we be looking for now? Let's move in that direction then. What should we be? Right, there are texts coming through now, and I still get the emails, but it seems like the texting is way more prevalent.
Yes, the texting has gotten so much more because people are not used to texts being malicious, right? Yeah. It's a new medium for, at least for malware. So really, the only great tools that we have at this point are educating people that if they're going to click on something that they don't recognize or weren't expecting, they've got to verify that it's legitimate before they click the link, before they download the document or click on the attachment at the bottom. There's no technological way at this point to tell, listen, this is a problem. So all those old red flags, we have to retrain ourselves, and the answer is BS, which is be skeptical and verify.
So it's really, common sense isn't the right term to use, but it's a little bit common sense, street smarts. I like the BS, be skeptical, right? So if you're not sure, ask someone, right? Even ask a coworker.
Yeah, mindful skepticism. It's not about paranoia. It's really about, okay, in this company, what is our procedure when I get an email that I'm not certain about? Do I send it on to IT and have them, grant access to it? Does it have a little yellow bar at the top or a warning bar that says, hey, this is from outside, be super careful? Do I call and verify it by secondary means? And I get, this is a lot of work, right? It's the convenience that they're playing on, that this is not convenient to do. And yet 80% of all the successful attacks where they utilize phishing, to get in, it's from those exact things that stop it. So there's not really a choice. We also, it's more work to have your car updated and wear your seatbelts and everything else, but that's what we do to stay safe.
So if you had, I'm guessing you're going to say social engineering, but if you had to rank the three most common mistakes we make online, just as human beings, and maybe they're all within the social engineering standpoint, what would those be?
The three most common, I would say, are giving away credentials, meaning your login information, in some other form. So clicking on a link and it asks you, enter it here, and you put it in. Somebody emails you that looks like a coworker and you give it to them. Somebody calls you on the phone and says, hey, we've got a security incident. I need your login information. Giving away those login credentials.
Okay.
And now that has moved a little bit to the phone, because with passkeys, which we should talk about, passkeys replace passwords. Now you're authenticating with a physical device, and then you're scanning your face or your fingerprint or your phone code. Well, that's pretty much going to replace passwords online, getting into your work and so forth. That will replace it over the next couple of years. And that means that the security of that phone is paramount. Most people, and this is how I get to live hack a phone when I'm on stage. Most people haven't changed the default security settings and privacy settings in that phone. That is an absolute must. Everything from, okay, don't have a 4-digit numeric passcode. Have a longer, stronger alphanumeric, which every phone at this point can do. Turn on, there's all kinds of settings for security, privacy, stolen device protection on Apple devices. Mm-hmm. Those are all things that aren't on by default. You have to go in and change them. And because that phone is becoming the keys to the kingdom, I'd say that's another major one. And let me give one more, and we can come back and talk about any of these. One more is people don't have backups of their data, and particularly in the dental orthodontist communities, they don't have good enough backups. And so when ransomware hits, which is the number one malady that will hit these offices, they don't have a way to restore that data, and that is a major cost.
Okay, so let's start there. I do want to come back to the phone because I think for everybody listening, that's a critical component as well. But you're still seeing ransomware as for small businesses in particular as the single biggest threat?
Yeah, no question. It's just it's gotten so easy to do. I mean, you can go on, with a simple browser, the Onion router, Tor. You can go on to the dark web. You can buy ransomware as a service. And with a decent amount, with a modest amount of technical ability, you can set up a ransomware as a service in a matter of hours. So it's kind of democratized ransomware. And what that means is there's all of these crime rings, young kids out there making a ton of money by just a simple ransom on an office that when your stuff is locked up and you can't do business, you're pretty bound to pay it. I mean, you're operationally very dependent on your software in those offices. Yeah. And when they lock it up, you're in trouble.
So that still, though, comes back to social engineering, right? It's not, somebody can't, without your assistance, someone can't lock your data down. Is that a correct assumption?
You're correct, unless there's actually brute force attacks. So where they put in passwords over and over again and get into your accounts that way, and then they steal the data, they exfiltrate it, they lock it up with encryption, and then they blackmail you. They give you a ransom. So that can happen just purely through technology. It's so much more work for the criminals. They always go after the hackers always go after the humans first because it's much easier to get you to divulge that little piece of information than to brute force hack the system.
Okay. So then let's talk about backup. Is it a physical backup? Is backing up to the cloud okay? What is the recommendation there?
Yeah, so it's called a 3-2-1 backup. You want to have, in addition to your live production software, you want to have, believe it or not, 3 copies on 2 different media. So one might be a hard drive, one might be online, and one of them offline and off-site. Believe it or not, a lot of organizations have gone back to taking, having 5 disks, whether they're, gigabyte hard disks or whatever, terabyte hard disks, taking them off-site with one of the people so that it's encrypted and not in the office because there's so much damage done when they're still connected to the internet. So again, 3 separate copies on 2 different media, one of them off-site and online. That's a best practice.
Okay.
I realize for a small office that might be a little bit much, but at least having an encrypted off-site version that's, in the cloud. And by the way, Dropbox, that's not backup. That is a syncing service. So we're talking about, a different type, iDrive or Carbonite, those type of things.
Okay.
And the kind of the gotcha there is when it's online, it's also potentially hackable, right? So that's why bigger companies have gone to off-site, offline, drives, tape drives, whatever, where they've got it physically in a different location.
And how frequently are we recommending they do that? Is that daily, weekly, monthly? What is that from a best practices standpoint? What does that look like?
Best practices, I think, is real time. So for most of the businesses that are listening to this, I would recommend an online version of this in most cases. And I would have that would be updated all the time. You make a change right now, it's updated, it's encrypted, there's a long and strong password, there's very few people who have access to it, and so forth. And then maybe once a week on Friday afternoon, there's small drives now at this point that hold 8 terabytes. Putting that in, running the backup on that, encrypting it to make sure that if it gets lost, it's safe, and taking that off-site once a week, I think that's a great practice.
Okay, perfect. So let's come back to the phone for a minute.
Okay.
You talked about there are different privacy settings, and I'm sure that people were able to look up what those are and what we should be changing online. But talk to me about the facial recognition, the thumbprint access. How secure is that? Is that something we need to be worrying about? My kids are older now, but that none of them do the facial recognition on their phone. They're telling me it's not safe.
Yeah, that has been a question now for a decade of having biometrics on the phone. I tend to come down different based on device. So Apple devices keep that facial recognition code, so it's just a passcode that's based on your face or on your thumbprint. It's kept on the phone at all times. It doesn't go to the cloud.
Okay.
Google devices, however, store most everything in the cloud. Google is a cloud company. Apple is a hardware company. So for my Apple device, do I utilize facial recognition? I do, because I feel like it is a better passcode than what I would have if I put in, an 8-digit code. It's a far better passcode. It's more convenient. And again, it's this balance between convenience and security, right?
Yeah.
If it's convenient and therefore you actually use it and you use it to lock your bank, your health and so forth, I think you're in better shape. Now, if somebody really wants to get into your phone and they hold a gun to your head, it doesn't matter if they say, give me your code, and you type it in, or they put up to your face to unlock it.
Right.
The real question here is that code going to be hacked some way else that allows that person to get into your one phone? That's a pretty low probability that they're coming after you. Now, if you are the president, if you work for the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, yeah, that's a different thing.
All right, so let's go that direction then. There's been a lot in the news lately about chats on Signal, the end-to-end encryption of WhatsApp, the openness of messages on the Apple phone. So just from a purely communication standpoint, where should we be and what should we be worrying about?
Yeah, so that government case where they were on Signal, I think,
Yeah.
and broadcast the war plans to bomb Iran all over Signal that then became public. Again, that was a human decision.
Yeah.
Signal is an encrypted messaging, which means when you send it from here to there, it's got a tunnel and it's encrypted. But it was a human decision to accidentally add an Atlantic reporter onto the CC list that leaked that information. Had that person used the government-approved texting, which is less convenient, that person could have never been on there because they would have had user-level accesses of, yes, right, I can send this to X, Y, and Z. So again, we're seeing how it's not the technology, it's the human decision. In terms for all of us of communicating in a secure way, I'm comfortable with WhatsApp. I'm comfortable with Signal. I'm comfortable with Apple Messenger. Less comfortable when it's Apple Messenger to Google, because that crossing, as you know, anybody knows you've got green bubbles and blue bubbles, and when you get the other color, they're not as secure. It's just not the
Okay.
same system. It's not an internal system. But in general, all of those apps that are dedicated to messaging are good, good security for the average person like
Right.
you and I.
Right. Let's stay with the news. Lots of leaks from Target to Doge to everything else that's happening. I'm personally worried about identity theft, right? And hopefully not having made any major mistake, but all of these major places that have access to my social security number or passwords or whatever it is, that a lot of that data has been leaked. What steps should I take today to at least have some layer of protection for myself?
Yeah, those leaks have been kind of unbelievable, particularly the ones, as you mentioned, Doge, that, a lot of IRS data is out there. My answer to that is if you already don't have a PIN on your IRS account, which you can do, there's, irs.gov is the correct website, and you can go on and set up a PIN so that somebody else can't claim tax rebates,
Right.
tax returns on your social security number. Absolutely critical. Credit freeze, which we talked about way back in 2006, 2007, still something that you need to do. You can do it for free now. You can check on your credit every week if you want. You can freeze it and unfreeze it. Now, this doesn't mean your credit card or your banks. It means your credit profile with Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Okay.
So those three bureaus have a ton of information. And if somebody like, in my case, Rosemary Serrano got a hold of my social security number and bought a house in my name, well, if you have that locked down, that stops almost all of the financial fraud. So IRS PIN code, credit freeze is another huge one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, the passwords on your accounts. Again, whether they're breached, whether they get stolen, in these latest breaches that have happened and you use them across multiple sites, if you use a password manager and two-factor authentication, which we've been talking about for 10 years, or a passkey, which is the new version of that, if you're using those things and have a long and strong password, particularly the two-factor authentication or the passkey, because then the criminal may steal it from one source. They may get it from the IRS file, but they don't have the second factor of authentication or the passkey, the physical device like a phone that lets them into the other accounts. That's really what shuts down so much of this online crime.
Okay. So on that front, you're talking about some sort of password manager. Do you have a recommendation there for us as to what one or two that we should consider using?
Yeah, the ones that I really like are 1Password, Dashlane, and Keeper. Those three seem to me more robust. I use 1Password myself. I don't get paid to say it.
Right.
I like it because it's a Canadian company, Agile Bits, and they have a stronger privacy and security laws than we do in the United States. So I kind of trust how they're holding the data better.
Okay. So 1Password would be your top recommendation there.
Yep.
And then multi-factor authentication or the biometrics basically as the other option. Now, is that something I can set up if the organization or company I'm working with doesn't offer it? So I log into my local credit union. It doesn't give me an option for two-factor authentication or any of those other things. Is there anything I can do or I'm stuck?
My answer to that is get in touch with, you've picked credit union where, community banks and credit unions tend to be technologically behind. They don't have the same budgets. Call them and ask them if they are adding either two-factor or passkeys. And if they're not, I would seriously consider housing my money, the bulk of it in a different place, in a Chase, a Wells Fargo, where they have all of these tools because you are considerably safer. And I hate to say that. I work a ton with the credit union industry, and I love them, and they are member oriented. However, it's more important to have two-factor authentication or passkeys than to have that extra little level of service.
Yeah, 100%. Great. And how often then should I be changing those passwords? Just some simple basic, is that a once a month, once a year?
You know, I completely disagree, and so does the data with the FBI on this. The FBI says that you should change it monthly and or frequently. I completely disagree, because when people have to change it frequently, what they do is they take an easier passcode and they add a dash and a number to it. They simplify, they go backwards. My recommendation is that you have a 25, 30 character, and you can do this with a password manager. Even if you're using passkeys, you can, your initial passcode can be 25 or 30 alphanumeric symbols, spaces. It's too hard to hack. So if you do that and you do it once a year, or if there's, you read about a breach at Target, then you go in and you change it. But I think you're better off to have a really long and strong passcode the first time. And if there's no breach, I leave it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So what's the next big vulnerability? We're going to do two sort of wrap ups here. First, and I've got to assume it includes AI, but maybe it doesn't. But because with smart homes and TVs and refrigerators and everything else, what's the next big vulnerability? What's going to be targeted next?
Yeah, I think you've kind of already named it. So the Internet of Things, right, where everything is connected and therefore everything is a backdoor into other systems. Your thermostat by itself is not a big risk, so they change your temperature. The thermostat connecting to your network router that allows them into the computer that has your banking and tax information, that's a big thing. Really, where AI comes in is it makes all of this scalable. So instead of them doing this, at your house and then my house and at this office and that office, AI is going out and it's doing all of the grunt work. It's scaling it massively, millions. It's sending out 1 million phishing emails a day instead of 10 phishing emails a day, and it's the same way getting into devices. So I think the lesson here is when you set up new equipment, it doesn't matter if it's a laptop, a phone, a thermostat, a refrigerator, turning on the security features that it has, which in general they do now have. That is okay. Something that has changed, is you can put a username and a passcode on these devices, keeping track of those in the password manager and just locking down all the doors like you would in your home, putting a deadbolt on it. We're very good at that, but on the digital side, we hook up a new device, we put that new camera in, and we don't lock people out, and pretty soon our photos, our videos are showing up online.
Okay. All right, final question for you, and then we'll wrap this up.
Okay.
If you've got a minute with me, 2 minutes with me, what are you going to have me do immediately? I'm sitting down with you. I'm taking advantage of a flight with John Sileo, and you're going to help me harden my digital life, for lack of a better term. What are you going to have me do immediately? Obviously, password manager, right? We've talked about that, and we've talked about two-factor authentication. Should I be accessing through a VPN? Should I be not having Wi-Fi in my house? What are the things that I need to be worried about and doing?
Yep. So we're on a flight together. So the first thing that I would say is, if you're connecting to that Wi-Fi on the flight without a virtual private network, that's one of the first things that we should do is a secure communication. That doesn't stop all types of crime on the computer, but it stops a lot of it. We've already talked about, I would have you go and freeze your credit. I would have you go and freeze your IRS profile. I would have you do subscribe to a good backup system so that if your data is compromised, and probably the first thing I would sit there with you and do is I would go through the 30 or 40 settings on your phone that lock that thing down, because it is it's got everything on it. It's got connections to our banking, to our medical files, to personal stuff, to spreadsheets, to our work logins. So that phone, that iPad, that laptop, I'd sit there and we'd spend hours just locking down that.
Okay.
Now, I get that a lot of people don't have, they're not sitting next to me on the plane.
Right.
So what do? You have a professional come and help with it, and you sit there and you do it with them. You don't think that you can do this all on your own because there's way too many settings. We don't repair our own, e-vehicles anymore. It's too complex.
Yep.
And it's the same with computers and devices. Have a professional, and I don't do this work, so I'm not selling something, but having somebody who knows what they're doing come in and help you configure those things that we've already talked about, that would be the first thing I'd do.
So the biggest vulnerabilities, really what I'm hearing are the things that I need to be most worried about are my phone, my laptop, my iPad, whatever it is that I'm moving with, traveling with, walking around with, accessing, where I'm accessing all of my own data and making sure
yes,
those
and the
are
interface with the internet and how you're communicating through the internet. You're right. When it's mobile, it's at high risk because you can lose it. It can be stolen. So yes, you've kind of nailed it down to the mobile stuff. And then it's a little different, inside of an office. In particular, if you've got servers, or one we didn't talk about is configuring your cloud setup. A lot of companies set up something in the cloud, Salesforce or whatever, and they don't change the defaults and they don't give user level access. That's a huge one for the business side.
Okay. So I want more information. What do you have that I can access? Is there a newsletter? Can I follow you on Instagram? Where are you? Because I have a feeling there will be lots of questions that come out of this, right? We know that from your presentations. People love having you in and going through your course or your program. But things are changing so consistently. You have a newsletter, a YouTube channel. Where can I go to follow John?
Yeah, a couple of things. So my website, which is just my last name, Sileo, SILEO.com. There's a button to the blog. I do videos, as available, probably at least once a month on the latest issues and what you need to do about it. Those are both personal and those are business related. So Sileo.com/blog is where it is. LinkedIn,
right?
If you want to link in with me, that's a great resource where I put everything up. Just make sure that you mention this podcast so that I know, because I've got a lot of requests and I do not accept requests from everybody. So just say that you listen to this podcast and we'll link up and it'll be there. I do put stuff on Instagram and on my Facebook page as well. You can get to all of those, of course, through the website. But I would say LinkedIn or the blog are probably the two best sources.
Brilliant. Well, John, again, I want to thank you for everything. We have barely scratched the surface here. But I think there were a few very good takeaways for people listening that they can make immediate improvements to locking down their digital life. And I appreciate everything you've done for the network over the years, and I'm excited to keep working with you. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
As am I. Hope I get to see all of you at some point live.